So the Suburban is going to be getting a gas tank. The one that has now leaks a lot if it's full. So for starters, I drove it until it was down to about the red to E, and then I tried siphoning some gas. Now I tried using the blowgun with the hose to blow in there to get the fluid to come out, and that really wasn't working. So then I tried the vacuum to suck on the hose to get it to come out, and that also wasn't really working. So then I had the great idea, stuck the hose in the end of the gas can with a rag to seal it, the other end in there of course, and then the vacuum on the vent here. So the vacuum was sucking the air out of the gas can and in through the hose. And I had to do that for quite some time before I could get it to really siphon. It was very tricky to get how far the hose needed to be inserted. It goes in really easy for a ways, and then it gets jammed where the filler neck enters the tank. And then after that, it was really tricky to figure out where to get the hose to know that it was in submerged under the gasoline. But anyways, I siphoned out probably less than 5 gallons, maybe 2 or 3. But that little trick with the vacuum worked. It might be pretty dangerous because the vacuum cleaner's got a motor that's going to be making sparks, and you're sucking gas vapor into it. But it all worked out. So now I'm going to be undoing the filler neck, which is pretty simple. It's underneath here. You just undo these hose clamps, and then you're going to be dropped in the tank. One thing you're going to want to check is your bolts over here that hold the tank up. Appear to have been replaced, but you're going to want to make sure that you can actually get those loose, because if you can't get those loose, that's going to be another headache. Alright, so I will keep you updated. Okay, it's at this point of the show where I'm going to offer some pro tips that may or may not be helpful. Pulling the fuel pump relay and then turning the vehicle over a little bit will relieve any pressure that might be in the fuel line. This could make it so that when you disconnect it, it disconnects easier, or the same, or maybe some gasoline won't spray into your face. So that's one of the pro tips. Other pro tip, you can disconnect one of the sides of your battery now that you're committed, and that will ensure that you don't accidentally short circuit something, creating sparks, which might create a fire. So there's that relay. We're going to want to remember to put that back in when we're done. But now when we go to turn it on, turn it over a little bit, the fuel pump's not going to be sending any pressure, and therefore the engine turning over is going to suck up any pressure that's in the lines. Afterward, we'll disconnect the battery just to be on the safe side that we're not making sparks. Alright, once we've taken those safety measures, we're going to start undoing the strap bolts. Now yours probably look a little bit different than these. I believe these have been replaced. But basically, you're going to want to, they're right up in here. So you're probably going to want to take your plate off and spray some oil on those a while ahead of time, because they're right up like in here, right kind of behind the bumper, behind the hitch if you have one. And then the straps, once you get them unbolted, they just kind of get zeused out of the way. So then you're probably going to want to, I ran and grabbed a second jack. So you probably want to realize how deep this tank goes in. It's about 6 feet. So I got it support on one side, and I'm lowering the other side down now to get it at a nice angle. But the two jacks are supporting it well. It's not trying to fall off or anything, because we have to disconnect the the wiring and the fuel line still from the top of it. But anyways, definitely oil your strap bolts. You should be able to reach them if you take the license plate off pretty easily. Mine came right out because they've, like I said, I believe they've been replaced. And anyways, down the tank comes. So I decided to remove the filler thing here. There's 3 tiny little stupid bolts that you need a 7mm socket for. They felt like they wanted to strip, and then the last one broke off and the thing fell out of its location. Now I did that because looking at it, the thing is nasty rusty, like the rest of everything. And these hoses didn't feel like they wanted to come off. So that thing is getting replaced, so it's got to come off anyway, so I figured why not do it now. I'm working on getting the tank situated so that I can remove the plug, the electrical plug, and the fuel lines, and then the tank can come down the rest of the way. Alright, so I was able to get this tank safely down. I'm not really sure how you would get the hoses off of this without taking it off, but as you can see, this one was pretty nasty, so it's going to get replaced. I had to wiggle it back and forth a little bit to get the hoses to slide off. I really don't know how you would do that with it still attached up at the top. Anyways, looking under here, the electrical connections over there, they unplugged from here really easily. There's just a little tab you bend back and they pull off. So now all that's left is these fuel lines that need to come off, and then the tank will be totally free. Okay folks, the fuel tank is out. My pro tip about releasing the pressure in the line was totally wrong, because when they came off they shot gas. Luckily I had my hand in front of them, so none of it shot into my eyes or mouth. Now a lot of the fuel lines have, you stick these weird circular things over them, push and pull off. This truck recently got new fuel lines, and I guess they decided to use these things where you just kind of, I just had to pinch these in and then the line pulled off. So that was actually really easy. I'd been complaining and dreading about removing these lines because I knew they didn't use the correct 2 nuts where you just take 2 wrenches and unthread them. But this actually came off really easily, so that's pretty nice. Here's just a look at the plugs. The one's got a snap right on top, and then the other one had the snap on the side here, so those came off really easily. There's one more hose here that should have one of these springy clamps if it didn't rust off. Sorry about that. The springy clamps are all rusted off. But anyways, there's one more hose to pull off there, and this tank is a mess. There's a piece of sandpaper on top of it. Who knows what that's about? I sure don't. So anyways, now that it's out, next is gonna come the new tank, which isn't, well, the new tank is gonna be upcoming. It's not here yet, but that's okay because there's a couple of other things I want to do in the meantime. Okay guys, now's the point where I'm going to do something potentially questionable. The tank is out, free, drained of gas. Took most of the stuff off of it. I'm going to be cutting an access hole in the back here. So I peeled the carpet back. It comes back pretty easily. Just undo the trim and I just cut around the tie downs this time and around the tire because I didn't want to deal with taking them out. So anyways, I'm going to be cutting an access hole. I believe this is where the center of the sending unit is. So you want your hole around that somewhere. I probably wouldn't recommend doing this unless the tank is already out, in case you nip a fuel line or damage the tank or start a fire. But since the tank is out, I'm going to do it. And then if the fuel pump goes out, it's going to be super easy to change. Also, I've got this rust hole here that I've been beating with a hammer. So after I cut this access hole out, I'm going to put that metal over this hole and put this sheet metal that I stole off of something over the access hole. So, you're all wondering, where is that point? It's right about 28 inches from the side. It's right down the center is where I believe it to be, and then back from the weather stripping, 21 inches, and that is where I believe the center of the sending unit is going to be. Now, as for sizing the hole, we're going to take a look. The sending unit seems to have about a almost a 5-inch diameter. So keep that in mind when you're sizing the hole, that you're going to want a little bit of room. And enough room to get that out, of course. So basically a small update. It's day 3. The new tank is in. It's going to be going in maybe tomorrow or the next day. Here's the piece that got cut out for the access hole. Up there is where the rust got cut out. This piece is gonna end up covering the rust cut out piece, and then there's a new piece for the access hole that I've got. One thing to note is that there is a cross brace thing that comes across here. So when I was cutting this piece out, I cut through that as well. And that cross brace does sort of line up with where I believe the sending unit is. So you sort of need to cut through that. Anyways, further up, that's a big body mount cross member, and then below it there's another cross member there that holds the shocks and stuff like that. Lots of rust on this thing, but anyways, I'm gonna get this piece in and get back to work. Okay, enough with the floors. Setting up the new tank, you have to get out these fuel tank vent valves. I believe these have to do with the evap system, which is a worthless, useless, bullshit system. But anyways, you have to get these out of these holes. And I cut this one out because I couldn't figure out how to get them out. So here's what the back side looks like. And basically, you have to turn it until the notch here lines up with those notches. But if you can't just turn it till it stops, because why the fuck would that make sense? So you have to turn it until it stops the one way, pointing toward the other one, and then you turn it the other way, all the way, turn it back a little bit, and then you have to pry it out. And it's very difficult to get it out of there and very dirty. So I believe I would recommend you just buy new ones. They're about 13 bucks a piece. So I'm going to be reassembling the tank and greasing everything up with petroleum jelly so it slides on really nice. And like I said, with these things, you have to turn it. I'd love to say it's the stupidest thing I've ever seen, but it certainly isn't, because everything is so stupid. You have to turn it all the way, then turn it back some, and then try to pry it out of the hole. I would kind of suggest you order new ones while you're at it for all the trouble. I didn't think to do it because I didn't realize how terrible they are. So getting the hoses back on and everything, and the sending unit in, I poured a little bit of gas into the sending unit. There's a little cup thing, because when I took it out it was full of gas. You might not need to do that or not. And then I greased up the ring, the seal I mean, put it in, and then this snap ring kind of just clicks on. It's really pretty simple, easy to figure out. You don't need any special snap ring pliers or anything. In fact, this ring doesn't even have that option. You can kind of just bend it out of the way. So pretty simple to go on. Tank is ready to go back in, but since it gets dark at 4 o'clock now, it's gonna have to wait till tomorrow. Alright guys, underneath the truck here, and it is very rusty. Anyways though, now before we put the fuel tank back in, would be a great time to make sure that we get any slack out of these lines, to make it easier. Your fuel lines here, you don't really have much slack. Your wires here, evidently there's two different styles, and one style needs to be changed if you have it because it doesn't work correctly. This one appears to have the correct style, I guess. You could gain some more slack out of these wires by pulling on it here. There's a ground wire that I don't think you can see because it's a little bit too far back. Actually, there's a ground wire here that just goes to this cross member. So you could relocate that to the other side of this cross member and gain a little bit of slack. I've got my handy access hole, so I shouldn't really need any slack because connecting everything back up should be pretty easy. So it's time to go get the tank and raise it up. So wrestling the tank back up, and here is why I cut this big access hole, because now it's super easy to reattach this evap line and then the fuel lines. Just need to get pressed on. This has got what I believe to be a different style connector that you just push on like that. Grab the other one and do the same. Just kind of push on. Like I said, reconnect that line, and then I can grab the wires and plug those in. Really straightforward. One thing to note when you're trying to lift the tank up, make sure the tank straps are clear because it got caught on those for me. And then the other thing is to remember, I don't know if you can really see it, you got to remember your filler hose is off in here, and you got to get that up between the frame and the body over into the right position. Okay, so you got to wrestle the tank up in there with, I was using 2 jacks, and when I say wrestle, I mean wrestle, because it's a pretty snug fit. And then you get the tank straps, and remember that anti-seize is going to be your friend on those bolts. And then our final step is going to be to reinstall the filler neck, which was we're replacing here. And we have this weird grounding, kind of like a wire thing, so maybe we'll connect that up. Probably doesn't do anything though, but we're gonna have to wiggle it onto these tubes and reinstall it on the hole there. Pretty simple job. So once you got the filler neck resecured, pour some gas in and fire her up. Now some final notes. This is what it looks like with the access hole now. You have these wires that you could if you were to try to cut this with the tank in, You have these wires you could possibly chop. The hoses and fuel lines look pretty clear, and you do have a few inches between the tank and any of the lines. It's probably about 3, maybe 4 inches. In case you want to cut this without dropping the tank. A final note, this is, by the time I get this floor patch buttoned up, this is going to be somewhere around over 10 hours, probably around 15 hours I've spent doing this. So if you're not the patient type, this is not a job for you. Also, if you don't have at least one jack, this is not the job for you. If not, you almost need 2 jacks to do it. And then other than that, you just need some wrenches, pliers, screwdrivers. Nothing else was too complicated. It was just rather involved. It took quite a bit longer than I was expecting.